This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. This is our second podcast, and today I'm delighted to be joined by another of my Brave New Coin colleagues, Mr. Josh Olszewicz. Did I get that right, Josh?
No, but that's okay. Not many people do. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. So Josh, you're a Brave New Coin guy. You write weekly price analysis reports for Brave New Coin. Typically you'll do Bitcoin and then one of the top altcoins like Ethereum, Monero or Litecoin. And in my opinion, and obviously I'm very biased, but your reports are excellent. You know, they're really good. I used to read them long before I joined Brave New Coin. Can you tell me, how did you first come to work for BNC as an analyst? And is that how you describe what you do?
It is. Yeah, sure. So like rewinding the tape all the way back to pre-2013, I've always kind of been a data guy and like a experiments, results-driven scientist sort of guy. And that's really driven the articles that you see today on Brave New Coin. As far as, in the beginning, they were really, really terrible. Like, if you go back a couple of years now, I've been writing, and they've changed a lot for the better, I think. They've changed, not only as I've learned how to write better and how to write about crypto better, but they've certainly gotten longer, which some people don't always like. But I think they are more... They have lots of depth, breadth. I feel like they're succinct. There's mainly like several vignettes that I talk about on all these articles that I sort of had to find individually over the past couple of years. They've sort of emerged over the past couple of years, or they've been created over the past couple of years. So that's kind of how I got to now. Writing's not really my thing. I'm more of a visual medium sort of guy, or a talking sort of guy. But, with practice and discipline, anybody can do it.
That's right. And what I like about your reports, Josh, is, they're a really strong mix of fundamental, macro, and technical analysis. So, for example, each report you'll typically include fundamental blockchain factors like the current hash rate, the block reward difficulty, on-chain transactions, mempool data, active wallet addresses, all that kind of stuff. And then you do a complete technical analysis breakdown as well. So you're looking at support, resistance, the cloud, moving averages. How did you pull together, I guess, the necessary skills to become such a complete analyst on both the blockchain fundamentals and then the technical analysis side as well?
A lot of learning, a lot of time on my hands doing nothing else but crypto, living it,
right.
Hearing. The big thing is listening to people who know what they're talking about, or reading about this stuff from people who know what they're talking about, and understanding it and adapting it to how I think it might work or not work. I'm not really the type of person to create new metrics or new indicators or whatever, but I can understand the existing data extremely well and sort of interpret it and tear it apart and make predictions and, hopefully make money from it at the end of the day. That's my goal anyway. But yeah, as far as the technical stuff, initially I just only wanted to do technical stuff, and Fran, I think it was Fran or Ben, my editor, was like, we really want both. And I was like, I wasn't a fundamental guy. I didn't really understand a lot of this stuff the way I do now. But again, once you learn about it over and over and over again, eventually it sinks in, and then eventually you realize, hash rate makes sense and is important for price. It's important for mining. It's important to understand where the electricity comes from, where the nodes are, and then it just like unravels on itself, and there's just these pieces that connect. And I don't know, it kind of all makes sense after it sinks in.
Exactly right. And for any listeners who have not read one of Josh's reports before, they're pretty easy to find on the bravenewcoin.com website under price analysis, I think. And you pump those out on a weekly schedule, don't you?
Yeah, I try to do 3 a week with ETH and BTC at least once every other week, and then mix in other stuff based on what I see in the markets or what I see people looking at or what they want to hear about. Or, for example, this Ethereum Classic one I'm putting together now, there's a hard fork coming up, so I always like to get ahead of that stuff so that at least people are informed. I'm informed. I do most of the stuff for me first and foremost. It's just like, one, I'm thankful people want to read it and find it useful. And two, it helps me get a better picture of the market from a trading perspective.
Let's talk a little bit about trading. You have a reputation on Twitter as a good trader. You're known as a trader. You put out some great charts. Obviously you're a very good technical analyst. What's your background with trading though? How does someone become a full-time crypto trader?
Well, I certainly didn't seek out trading from the perspective of I wanted to completely take over my life and become the main source of income for me or whatever. I think that was a large part of my success because some people get into this and they think they treat it as a casino where they just assume, they see all these people making thousands of dollars a day or whatever it is, hundreds of thousands, and they assume that they can just open up a BitMEX account and off they go. I came in around 1300 and the bear market hit, so I lost money gracefully basically as I was learning, and so that when the bull market hit, things kind of took off for me in a good way, and I was sort of prepared from a risk management perspective and knowing that I shouldn't be trading my entire stack every trade and keeping at least 50% in cold storage, just from a custody perspective. You don't want to keep everything on an exchange and then get hacked. You could make millions of dollars, but if it gets hacked and it gets stolen and not reimbursed, that's game over. So you definitely want to mitigate against that. I don't know. I'm definitely very visual, so that's certainly helped as far as charts are concerned. I've gotten more visual as the years has come on. I've learned trending strategies that have been really successful for crypto because especially Bitcoin likes to trend pretty hard. And in between that, just basic chart patterns. The stuff I look at on a day-to-day basis is surprisingly few and far between compared to what most people look at. I see all these Elliott wave, XYZ, blah, 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 wave, whatever. And I don't have time to think that hard. I don't know. I try to keep it black and white. I try to keep it away from my own devices, from subjectivity, and just listen to what the indicators are telling me because historically they've done really well. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, trading is about creating your own personal system or set of rules and then, really committing yourself to not breaking those rules, right?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, you've got to find a system that works for you, that makes sense to you, that allows you to make money. You've got to find an exchange that helps you make money. I've tried BitMEX before it was illegal for Americans, and early on I could just never make money there. And maybe it was me, I don't know, it probably was, but I always did better on other exchanges. So I encourage people, if you really want to trade, start with a small stack, have a couple of accounts, fool around with leverage a little bit, 5 to 10x, but don't make too many trades, and have conviction, use appropriate sizing. These are all things that I'm continually learning myself, so it's not like this happens overnight. That was another benefit of the bear market in 2014-15. It was long, it was grueling. It allowed me to really understand crypto better, allowed me to understand trading better. Seeing people get into this market now, trying to figure out trading, I can understand how most of these people have no clue what they're doing. Yeah,
and for the average person who is starting to fall down the crypto rabbit hole, they're probably better off just dollar cost averaging Bitcoin for quite a while before they go too far into trader world, right?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with trying to get into the deep end immediately and then failing and saying, okay, whatever. But eventually, as long as you're paying your tuition through failing and learning that this is what I'm doing, and then eventually get better, that's really the goal for everybody. But if you're failing repeatedly, don't know why, constantly blowing out your account, constantly getting margin called, these are the things that will not help you become profitable long term, for sure. It's something like 90+% of people blow out their trading accounts within the first couple of weeks, and I think something like 98% of people aren't profitable over the long term.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Yeah, so you got to keep a journal of what you're doing. I can't hit this hard enough, but you got to make as few of trades as possible. That's why trend trading is such a great strategy for new traders, because you just set it and forget it. You buy and hold, and that's it. A lot of people do the exact opposite of anything remotely related to making money. From a profitability perspective, they'll sell the bottom out of fear, they'll buy the top out of euphoria, and that's how you get chart situations like we had today, where the FOMO kicks in, all these people buy at the top who haven't already, and then they lose all this money when it pulls back. Or like in December, when we were seemingly going to zero and we didn't, but there's a lot of fear and capitulation that happens there. The other thing you'll see is, in a bull trend like this, you'll see a lot of people trying to short repeatedly and get their stop loss run over and over and over and over again. And there comes a point where they either don't have any more money, or they finally realize that maybe that's not the best strategy. Eventually, like today, when we pulled back 10% or whatever it was, it'll work out. But unless you're hitting the charts hard on low time frames, it's very difficult to be profitable long term.
And you talked about the emotional side, and I think people underestimate how emotions can really mess you up. And crypto, because crypto is so volatile up or down, those emotions are just magnified so much more. Like, I remember one of my most vivid memories of the 2017 bull market. I remember in December 2017, I was trying to sell like this tiny amount of Bitcoin, like 0.4 Bitcoin or something at the time, on this little Australian exchange, and it took me 30 minutes to slowly offload it, because it was a little exchange, not many buyers. But that was probably one of the most intense 30 minutes of my life. And then at the end of it, just the sense of euphoria, it's intense, right?
Yeah, the emotions probably don't get talked about enough, honestly, especially in crypto. I mean, we're talking about life-changing, generation-changing money, changing hands here. If you're not used to it, which I certainly wasn't, the emotions are intense, and I'm not an emotional guy, but it's definitely something you need to sort of calibrate with yourself, as far as understanding the euphoria, the fear. If I feel like X, I should probably do Y today, or knowing better that when you made a bunch of money, you probably shouldn't get right back into a trade. These sort of things, your emotions, and especially because this is 24/7, you're up at all hours, you're losing sleep, you're doing whatever, and that's just compounding the emotional lability, or whatever. If you're emotionally labile, if you're all over the place, there's no higher high and there's no lower low than trading. That's for sure.
Fantastic. Could not agree more. And look, for any listeners that, if you're really interested in reading more about Josh's thoughts on trading, Josh, you published a really good Medium post, I think, at the start of last year. I think it's pinned to the top of your Twitter, but that Medium post is excellent, and you really go through a lot of your trading philosophies and strategies, don't you?
Yeah, I do. And it's eventually you read enough stuff and you do this over and over again, and you're like, okay, I understand it, and eventually you catch on more and more and more, and then hopefully at some point in that journey you become profitable.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
Now, Josh, I want to talk about Bitcoin because this week has been quite an exciting week for Bitcoin, right? The volatility has returned.
Yeah, I mean, since April, it's been a completely different animal. And that was largely foreshadowed by a series of reversal chart patterns from a technical perspective. It was foreshadowed by on-chain activity in April and May, and sustained near all-time high on-chain activity as well. So it's not any surprise as far as the fact that we're moving up. I think the veracity and the ferociousness that we're moving up is a bit of a surprise.
That's right. And look, just to put that in context, so we started the year at a little bit over 3K, I guess, deep in the bear market. And now today is Thursday, the 27th of June. And yesterday, Bitcoin hit 12K. When I woke up this morning, Bitcoin was at around over 13K, and it's dropped back to 12.5 now. Are you surprised by the swift turnaround from where we were at the start of the year?
Bitcoin's known for, crypto in general, it's just known for its volatility, mainly because once there isn't, it's called float. Once there isn't crypto in the market to buy or sell, it just dries up, and then, whatever's for sale is for sale, and that's kind of it. So over the course of pre-April, we kind of went sideways, and then we moved up swiftly in April. And ever since then, it's just been buying, with a series of related events and news that have certainly helped and pushed this higher. But in total, from like 4K to 14, we didn't have more than a 10% pullback for the most part, which is pretty incredible. And all of this happened within a 90-day time period.
Right, and it feels like a lot of traders had been looking for that pullback for, as you say, weeks, if not months now. But Bitcoin, when it goes on a run, like it has in recent months, it just did not want to dip. How many monthly green candles have there been in a row?
Well, this will be 3 for sure, at least.
And we're miles above the 200-day moving average, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a one thing is like waiting for a dip, and the other is having proper risk management so that you're not FOMOing in at the top, you're not chasing the market, and then have it reverse on you like it did today, 10-15%, whatever it was. You don't want to be that guy, especially if you're buying it with size or with leverage on margin. It just gets really hairy really quickly. So I always tell people, not trading advice, but be careful what you're doing. If you dollar cost averaged in, you want to dollar cost average out. You want to not pay attention to the price so much. Go outside, be active, do other things, because you don't want to get tied up in the day-to-day minutia market movements. Like, it's exciting the first time, and then after that, it's just like, okay, this is just what crypto does, And then mentally, you just have to be prepared for that.
So, and obviously we have had, I guess you'd call it a significant pullback this morning after effectively going parabolic this week. But do you think there'll be a more significant correction to come?
I mean, what we'd like to see, I think a lot of the trading community is some sort of consolidation. It's always good to have a parabolic rise, sure, but the problem with parabolic rises is that they pull back swiftly and without mercy very quickly in a matter of hours. We pulled back, a couple days worth of up movement in like 15 minutes. So that's really hard to trade if you're not sitting down at your computer. Crypto's 24/7. A lot of people use bots as well, which is a different story, but or algorithmic trading. But in general, people prefer multi-month trends where there's some sort of predictability as far as what's going on from a trading perspective. Certainly, today we had the highest volume since we on the daily candle since April, with sort of a really nasty pullback. So that indicates to me that we're probably going to pause here for a little bit before going forward.
It feels like there's probably a number of people that have been sitting on the sidelines with some cash who were potentially looking for an entry over, the last month or so. And do you think, is that kind of narrative true? And does that stop a pullback from being too severe, or will those people just get scared and they won't buy?
It kind of depends on who it is, their mindset. If it's institutional people, I don't think they care. As far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for a deep pullback. I'm looking for crying and blood in the streets and all this stuff. So that's going to happen eventually. It always does. It's just a matter of time. So I'm not too concerned. The other thing is, if you've held at all between now and April, anything, it's hard not to make money on this. So at some point, people are going to start taking profit. And then as people slowly take more and more profit, the higher up we go, eventually that turns into resistance, somewhat like it is today. And then other people say, okay, now's the time to take profit because other people took profit, or because price went down like it did today. And then you sort of get this little cascading effect psychologically where everybody's saying, all right, I'm up 50, 60%. It's probably a good time to go back to cash in the short term. And so then you get stuff like we got today, just a massive drop very quickly, and craziness, skies falling sort of situation. But in general, that was nothing compared to what we could be getting. Like you said earlier, we're miles away from the 200 daily moving average. So that's really the litmus test as far as, can the trend sustain itself after a pullback to that level.
Yesterday, Josh, you tweeted a trading view chart, and you mapped out all of the technical price action alongside all the major macro news events since, I think, August last year. And, I was looking at that chart, and it's fascinating to, see exactly how much has happened in under a year. And it's that old cliche about, how fast the crypto market works. But it's amazing how much can happen and how much can change in 10 months, right?
Yeah, I was sort of like feeling really out of it from a what the hell happened perspective. Yeah. So I just had to sit down and put everything together. I forgot about the node denial of service and inflation vulnerability that was patched in September 2018, which seemed like a massive deal at the time, and it is, and it was. But the more important part of putting all this stuff together is to realize in the near term how none of this stuff really matters that much. Even the Binance hack with the threat of rolling back the blockchain, that is a big deal and will always be a big deal, because once that happens on a chain, there's no going back. But looking at it from a price perspective, it was barely a blip. That was at 5,800, and we're almost 10K above that level at this point. So it's just really funny to sit down and put all this stuff together. And the other reason I wanted to do this is because a lot of people were saying how fundamental events drive this market, blah blah blah, and that's fine. But for me, it's all about the technicals, and they were all over this before April. Late March, they were all over this move. So I don't think anybody predicted past 10K this quarter. If they did, congratulations. There are certainly people who traded this well and held all the way since April, but it's hard to even predict that from a technical perspective.
Do you think, Josh, is it safe to finally say that we are in a full-blown bull market? Is there any reason or any indicator, anything you could point to and say, well, the bear market's not over, this is a suckers rally, and there's no reason why we can't go to 2K? No,
as soon as we were above the 200 EMA and on the daily and above the cloud on the daily, that was on April 2nd. So as far as I'm concerned, that was when the bear market is over, and we'll stay in a bull market until we're below both of those metrics. But we could go to zero tomorrow, but as far as the trend is concerned, that's when the bull trend started, most certainly. And the prices acted completely differently since we were above the 200 daily moving average. The last time prior to April 2nd was July 30th, where we briefly popped above it. But ever since then, it's just been grinding low volume down movements for the most part. And yeah, it's just been a completely different story since then.
Yeah, and I like what you said about those, a couple of months ago we had 3 significant macro major bad news events, right? Like the Tether Bitfinex drama, the Binance hack, and the Bitstamp flash crash. And even in the 2017 bull market, it feels like any single one of those events would have caused a major panic sell moment, but the price just did not really want to budge on those events this year, did it?
Yeah, it's all about, what's that saying about real estate? Location or something. I feel the same way about these bearish events. Like if Binance would have been hacked like in late December at 3K, completely different story, But the fact that we already had this huge momentum, the train was already rolling, and nothing could stop it. And the other part about that, even the Tether stuff, a lot of this bad news is like good news for Bitcoin. Certainly 7,000 Bitcoin being stolen from an exchange isn't a feel-good story, but the Tether stuff is certainly bullish for Bitcoin because it takes people out of Tether and into other stuff, mostly Bitcoin, but also some other stable coins.
Let's. I just want to switch over back to some fundamentals briefly, Josh. So
sure.
Now the Bitcoin is it's back over 12K, and the Bitcoin hash rate is at an all-time high, I think, of 65 trillion hashes per second. Can you put that into context for the listeners? What does that mean? Give us some idea of the scale of computing power involved and what it means for the network, and does price follow hash?
Sure. I mean, I don't think anybody can legitimately understand what that really means, but I know I'm pretty sure at this point it's the world's biggest supercomputer by a large margin. I might be wrong on that, but there are certainly a lot of people all over the world, mainly China, mainly where electricity is cheap, British Columbia, Canada. There's a nice chunk of miners in New Zealand, actually, because of the hydro and geothermal stuff. Venezuela, where electricity is cheap. So there's people who add mining power hash rate all over the place. The more people that add the hash rate, the less of a reward you get. But as price goes up, as there is more on-chain network activity, fees collected per block goes up, and the monetary value of the block reward goes up, the notional USD value. So the more we increase in price, the more and more mining power can be supported, because X mining hash rate at 3,000 is less of a reward than at 12,000. So it's no surprise that we are seeing massive jumps in hash rate. Another thing to think about is the seasonal variations in the cost of electricity globally. I don't know this for a fact. I just know this as far as what other people have reported. But apparently in China during the rainy season, the hydro costs go down to 4 cents per kilowatt, which is almost free. There are certainly some areas of Texas. I was talking to one of the miners at one of the last conferences. They actually get paid to take the electricity off the grid because the grid gets overloaded. I don't fully understand the metrics or the technical implications of that, but it just sounds like the grid can only hold so much, and then when it exceeds that value, people are paid to remove it. So they get paid not only for the block reward, but for taking electricity off the grid. So it's a win-win for them. But overall, cheap electricity from April to this quarter, shocker that it sort of aligns there, as we're seeing hash rate go up to all-time high levels.
Okay, so what about the Bitcoin halving event? Can we talk about that just briefly? So the Bitcoin halving I think that's scheduled for around May 2020. Now that's under a year away, and presumably some of the bullish price action of this year is people starting to anticipate that event. I know you follow Litecoin closely. Is there anything we can learn from, because Litecoin have their halving event coming up, and Litecoin has obviously done quite well this year. What can we learn from what's happening with Litecoin, and what are the implications for the Bitcoin halving, do you think?
Sure. So I think it's definitely a speculative event, a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing where everybody's talking about it. And becomes a point where people try to front run each other getting into this pre-halving stuff. They get into it because they'll buy a coin pre-halving because they assume other people are going to buy pre-halving. So there isn't necessarily like an organic growth metric that you can look at and say the chain's being used more because its halving's coming up. Not really. It's just from what I've seen anyways, the trading volumes kind of go up. But when it really kicks in is post-halving, when the supply decreases pretty dramatically. And like I was talking earlier about the float, and when there just is less and less for sale. I mean, if you look at Bitcoin's case since inception, I mean, that's been the MO. It's just, when there's not enough for sale and demand stays the same or increases, price goes up. And that's just the way it is. And if you look at the UTXO set, which is basically the age of all the coins on the blockchain currently, 20% of the coins that exist haven't moved in over 5 years. So that leaves 80% that are more active, certainly, but most of those haven't moved for months or a year or more. So to see the supply as X, it's really a lot less than that from a trading perspective. When you look at where most of these coins are and how old they are, a lot of coins, a lot of people hold because it works, and it's become a mantra, a meme, with a disinflationary asset like Bitcoin, because of the block reward reduction every 4 years or something. It's definitely a saver's game, a holder's game, when you're just buying and assuming it's going to go up the next couple of years. It's worked so far,
That's right. And, the price action this week is just such a beautiful example of, what Bitcoin can do as the, most exciting, scarce asset on earth, really. If there's more buyers than sellers in the market, boy, it can shoot up quickly. But, speaking of which, who's doing the buying at the moment, Josh? Because it's interesting, if you compare to 2017, it's not really what you would describe as FOMO, and there doesn't seem to be the same level of retail buyers in the market. There's no mainstream media coverage. The Google search data has not really moved. What does that tell you?
Well, I'll hit the Google search stuff first. I honestly don't think we'll ever see Google searches reach the levels they were relatively, because I think for the most part, there's a lot more articles about Bitcoin. Most people have heard about Bitcoin. If you just walk up to 10 people on the street, at least 5 of them are going to say, yeah, I know what that is, and the other 5 are probably going to say I've heard of it. So I don't really know about that. But what we are seeing is a lot of activity in China based on on-chain volumes, certain exchanges. We're seeing a lot of Tether turnover in China, where they're using it as a medium of exchange for settlement. And we've got all these macro events. I was listening to your podcast with Andrew that you did prior, and I agreed with everything he said. We're talking about global zero interest rate policies or no interest rate policies on just punishing savers, and they want to put their money somewhere. They either speculate on the stock market, equities, real estate, whatever. But eventually that's going to spill over into things like gold or crypto, and Bitcoin in this case, that has some sort of store of value narrative that's worked for the most part over the past 10 years. So there's a lot of that going on. There's just, I feel like there's never been this much macro stuff pushing Bitcoin higher, but excuse me, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. The Hong Kong stuff, the Venezuela stuff, the US-Iran saber rattling, the US-China trade war, Trump's at war with Mexico over everything. The list goes on and on and on. So all of this is bullish for Bitcoin.
No, Josh, I completely agree, and I agree with what Andrew said in the first podcast, and his reports go into that in great detail, and they're downloadable from the Brave New Coin website. But if that's the case, and I think you're right, but it's easy when you're in this crypto bubble like we are. There's still so many people, I guess the mainstream people out there, if you say to them, Bitcoin is a decentralized currency with, it's a good hedge against modern monetary theory and global political unrest or whatever. They're just going to look at you like a crazy person, aren't they? So aren't they still, what happens when real FOMO hits is what I'm trying to say.
So I think it's a big generational thing, like you're hitting on. I think the millennial age or lower is completely ready for digital cash, digital currency. They buy and sell all sorts of stuff on Venmo, on Cash App, on PayPal, on Fortnite. Wow. Everybody in my age group or lower is completely comfortable with that sort of thing. So to come to someone who's never heard of Bitcoin and say, hey, I can, we can store your money on a currency that you don't need special access or a third party. All you need is this app on your phone. And they're like, okay, sure. Also, millennials don't trust banks at all. The trust in government and banking is declining dramatically in those generations and those age groups. A lot of millennials feel like they've gotten a raw deal from people in older generations, and that is fueling that distrust as well. So they're looking to put money somewhere at some point, after they pay their student loans or whatever. I think it's largely a generational thing, and there really isn't that big of a hurdle to get over as far as digital cash sort of situation.
Josh, I think you're exactly right, and a good point there is, back in 2017, in the 2017 bull market, it wasn't that easy to just go and buy Bitcoin, let alone altcoins. You had to really learn what you needed to do, join an exchange, KYC, blah, blah, blah. But now so many millennials and other, everyone, especially in the US, you can just have, the Square Cash App and just buy Bitcoin with the click of a button, which didn't really exist in 2017, right?
Yeah, there's an insane amount of apps that you can buy crypto through now all over the world. There's something like over 200 exchanges in South Korea, just to give people an idea of just like the scope of the places you can buy crypto now is astronomical. And especially with ICOs sort of cooling off, the sort of ultra high net worth or high net worth individuals, I think are gravitating away from things like SAFs or special OTC deals for ICOs and are more gravitating towards something that doesn't have regulatory risk like Bitcoin versus gambling on an ICO, which could get regulated to death or just never come to fruition because it's a security and it can't be traded in the US or used in the US, and it goes on and on and on. And we're seeing more and more of that. So I think it's not surprising to see the money come back in to mainly Bitcoin here, even though, one Bitcoin is whatever it is, $12,000. And, you can buy X multiples of some ICO token with that amount of money. But at this point, I think people are slowly coming to the realization that the risk for Bitcoin from a long-term perspective is pretty low as far as government interference is concerned.
Looking for near real-time crypto asset spot rates for everything from Tron to Monero or Doge to BNB? Brave New Coin's GWA and MWA crypto APIs calculate a fair price for over 1,500 assets and 6,000 pairs across the global network of crypto exchanges. At 30-second tick intervals and available via streaming or REST API, Brave New Coin's GWA and MWA APIs deliver independent third-party price discovery you can rely on.
I want to talk about the altcoins really quickly, because one thing that I've noticed in the recent Bitcoin rally is, of course, the alt Bitcoin pairs have been getting absolutely smashed. And I think, when people first come into crypto, a lot of people, they get seduced by the call of altcoins. And that's one of the tougher lessons to learn. If you hold altcoins over a long period of time, the opportunity cost of not being in Bitcoin instead can be a tough lesson to learn. What do you think's happening here?
Yeah, so if you look at historically what happens, Bitcoin will make a run up. The alts will follow loosely on USD pairs, but they will not be able to keep up on their BTC pairs just because they won't move at the same pace with BTC. Then you have people profit taking in Bitcoin, rotating into things like ETH, LTC, EOS, the higher cap stuff, and then eventually get rotations into the lower cap stuff. As Bitcoin kind of goes sideways and consolidates, that's when alts really do their best. When there's profit taking in the higher cap stuff, the lower cap stuff has a chance to sort of recover, to mean revert, to regain some speculative momentum in the bullish direction. But once Bitcoin gets going, what the thing you have, or we saw over the past couple of days, you have people capitulating on alt positions. You have margin positions getting margin called. It just gets really ugly. Again, you get this cascade where people are selling. There's fear. There's Bitcoin euphoria. There's FOMO, and eventually it just is a self-fulfilling self-feedback loop where people have held on alt at a loss for so long. Eventually they're like, well, I might as well just buy Bitcoin because it's going up, and I'm losing money, holding this altcoin going nowhere. So I think we're seeing a lot of that, or we saw a lot of that this run up. Not so much with ETH, but even in April and February with LTC, I mean, that sort of was the first mover, LTC and EOS. Those actually outperformed Bitcoin substantially in February, March, April. And then we had rotations out of those into ETH, XMR, the other higher cap, XRP, the other higher cap stuff. So you get this sloshing around of money, but for the most part, people, I think, prefer to on-ramp into Bitcoin. That might be wrong. It's certainly less of the case now than it was a couple of years ago because of the options available to people on Coinbase and all the other exchanges. But you can't on-ramp into Binance for the most part. I mean, you can do it, but I think a lot of people prefer to KYC elsewhere and then transfer crypto to Binance. I think for the most part, people view Binance as a crypto-to-crypto exchange.
Well, I'm just going to ask Josh, because a lot of people have been patiently waiting, and they're still waiting. When is alt season?
I've heard for the past 2 months that alt season's coming. But if people, if they pay attention to Bitcoin, I think that's going to be the guiding light, obviously, for most of the market. So, you can try to pick your horses with the 5,000 different alts if you want, and hold through this crazy move we've had since April. I mean, if you've been holding an alt since April and you're looking at this Bitcoin move, I don't think you're feeling pretty great. And eventually the desperation kicks in, and it's like, yeah, it's going to be alt season. Yeah, you're pumping yourself up. Yeah, alt season. And then it just doesn't come. And, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really an alt trader in general. For the most part, I'd stick to the higher cap stuff anyway. But if I'm trading an alt position, I buy like now, because we've capitulated pretty hard on a lot of, at least the BTC pairs. And, you just sell when it gets higher. I don't really like hold out for alt season or care. It just comes when it comes. But you can't, I don't think you can like bank on alt season coming when you're seeing, Bitcoin do something that hasn't really ever happened often in the history of the world. I mean, you just can't expect a rotation into alts soon when you see stuff like this, especially because liquidity begets liquidity. You can't buy $1 million worth of some alts because that'll move the book X percent. You just can't get into a lot of these alts the way people want to through like OTC channels or wherever aggressively, because there's nothing for sale, or the books are thin, or whatever. It just doesn't work like that. So that's another part of Bitcoin, and when we see prices go higher and the market cap go higher, that allows more things to happen. We already talked about mining, but from a speculative and buying perspective, it allows people to get in who couldn't otherwise get in, which is sort of counterintuitive, but that's just the way it works,
That's right. And, history often rhymes, but it doesn't always repeat. Hey, it's been amazing talking to you today, Josh. Can we finish on some rapid fire hot take questions?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's hit it. Rapid fire hot take. Here we go. Josh, crypto Twitter. What's your take on crypto Twitter? How important is crypto Twitter to crypto?
Bigly important. It's got to be curated, though. You can't listen to all the noise, definitely.
Where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I'm a profit maximalist in Bitcoin maximalist clothing, so I'll trade whatever I think I can get money out of, but certainly as far as the sleeping overnight test or long-term test, it's going to be holding most of my money in Bitcoin.
What would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion? Or you might have just said it, but hey, go for gold.
It's definitely the technicals are superior to fundamentals. That's my strongest conviction, certainly.
Josh, Facebook's Libra or Libra coin, good or bad for the crypto ecosystem, and why?
We almost made it 55 minutes without mentioning that. It's good from an exposure perspective. I think it's going to be meaningless in the crypto realm. It's going to be potentially game-changing in the advertising and influencing realm, marketing for things like Instagram, Facebook, and Uber, Lyft, any of these platforms. I think, like we were talking about earlier, with millennials being more comfortable with digital cash or digital currency, I think they're going to see this and not bat an eye. But from a privacy perspective, it's a nightmare.
What percentage chance would you give it of actually, I guess, successfully launching in the way that they want it to, you know, given the regulatory hurdles?
Well, it's going to launch somewhere. I just don't know if that somewhere is going to matter. I think it's going to see a lot of pushback in the US and Europe especially.
Sure, agree. Exciting nonetheless, though. Josh, if you could change one thing about the crypto industry, what would you change?
Oh, man. I don't know, honestly. Probably the development community. I don't know. I mean, I can't stand most everybody, but that's not necessarily a crypto thing. That's just a me thing. I don't know. I mean, it's crypto, baby. I mean, that's the fringiness, the grunginess, the hairiness of crypto is what makes it crypto.
Yes, cypherpunk for life. Josh, what is your secret trading weapon?
My secret trading weapon? I don't know. I'm not using a stop loss.
Ooh, controversial. Josh, Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What do you think the blockchain space looks like in 10 years' time?
Hopefully nobody knows anything and it just happens in the background, kind of like the credit card system. You know, it's great that we can learn about crypto, but mainstream adoption isn't really going to happen if everybody has to learn the difference between proof of work and proof of stake and deflationary, disinflationary, inflationary, all this madness. We're going to be much better off if we can send value through any chain using any wallet and it just happens. I think it's going to be Bitcoin, but it doesn't have to be.
Sure. Josh, William Gibson said, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. What's an example of the future being here right now, but people just aren't really aware of it?
I think the ability to send any amount of money anywhere in the world, any time of day, man, that is just insane when I think about all the times I've been rate limited on my traditional accounts or needed to send money a certain time when the bank was closed. I mean, if everybody took crypto, the world would be a much better place, I think.
Nice. Josh, I want to zoom out for a second. What do you think is the long-term future for the human race? Dystopia or utopia?
Well, I'm a chaos maximalist, so I'm all in it for the dystopian future. I think that's how it has to be. I mean, we'll to get on something super controversial of vaccines versus no-vaxxers. I mean, that's just dystopia waiting to happen right there. Yeah, I don't think there's any chance we're not headed towards a dystopia.
Wow. I always, I prefer to be an optimist. I think you have a better time, but hey, respect your view. Josh, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or show?
Oh man, I really like the Lord of the Rings series for sure. I think that really got me onto sci-fi, fantasy, or whatever. I also like the Incarnations of Immortality. It's a pretty obscure series that I hope gets a book or a movie one day.
I'm not familiar with that, but I do like the title. Finally, Josh, in 3 days' time, it will be July. Are you considering the possibility that Bitcoin hits 33K in July? Where are we at?
I mean, at this point, anything's possible, but I think the market would be better served if that wasn't the case, because like I said earlier, when we see this parabolic rise, we just see complete death shortly thereafter. So it's much better if we have a a smooth transition, especially leading into halving and after halving, but we don't always get what we want. I'll take 33K any day.
Nice. All right. Hey, Josh, it has been fantastic talking with you today. Can you tell the listeners how they can find you on your various platforms?
Sure. Twitter, Carpe Noctem, YouTube, Carpe Noctem, on Brave New Coin. Look for me. I'm pretty much everywhere.
That's right. Hey, thanks for listening, everyone. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.